This one right here, you can look at it.
You want me to turn and look at that?
And a pleasant good evening on this Tuesday night. I'm Tom Heck, Jim Ledbetter tonight, our guest. And a reminder, before I forget, tonight is election night, and at 8 o'clock right here on KZGN, they're going to come up with a live broadcast for you, update some things, and should be very interesting. So tune in, Reed and the other analysts that handle the political scene will be around. Robert and Alan will also be there, and Fritz also will probably be here too. He likes to spend about 14 hours a day here. Poor guy, right now he's working his tail off. But Jim Ledbetter is a man of all hats. He works at the high school as a registrar, and he also is in charge of the officials' assignments for our entire area here. Jim, give us your background, how long you've been in town, and I know you were an ex-Marine. Tell us about that.
Well, I was a former Marine. I spent 26 and a half years in the Marine Corps. I got stationed here back in the late 70s, early 80s. Spent a tour here, brought my wife and family here. They wanted to stay when I got that tour done, and so I went out and commuted for 7.5 years from different bases, El Toro and Camp Pendleton. And my kids liked the school here, so I came back and did another tour. And then that's when I had my heart attack, and I ended up sticking around and going to work for the school system and working my way up from custodian all the way up through the different offices to be the registrar at Burroughs High School, and also heavily involved in sports when I was in the military, and continued that on under the tutelage of people like Pete Klassen and Dave Barrett and some other legends of the officiating local officials, and now I'm the assigner, secretary, treasurer, instructor, and official for local sports.
Mm-hmm. Jim, basically, besides assigning, is a guy that does. Tell about all the sports that you do, Jim. You do everything, don't you?
Well, there's a lot of us that do that, so it's not just me. We do high school sports, football, baseball, basketball, softball, volleyball. The other sports are done by other people, but we also do the base leagues sometimes when asked. We do the city intramural sports, basketball and volleyball and stuff like that. We do the flag football also for the city, for the little tykes, which we love to do. That's probably one of the funnest things we do. But 90% of the people are out there just to do something for the kids and to give back to the communities. And most people do not know the sacrifices all these brave men and women do, including yourself, Tom. All the things you do at the college, I don't know how you get time to come out and be a part of our crew, but you help us with softball and basketball, and you do a very good job at it. And you dedicate yourself to the community as much as these other guys do.
Well, thanks. We appreciate that. And picked up a lot in the referee world from Jim. He does a good job of breaking things down and trying to teach people some of the fundamentals. And a lot of people jump into officiating because they played the sport like I did, or coached the sport for a long time like I did. But it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be a good official, not whatsoever. And there's a lot of things that I think you always continue learning when you're officiating, myself included. But it's fun being around the guys, and most of them are very supportive. And Jim, a couple things I want to ask you. First, though, is how far in the past and now do you have to travel to officiate? Where do you get calls from for help?
Well, because I work at the high school, I don't do very many games locally, so I'm the biggest traveler of the bunch because I have to go out of town to travel. But I have a philosophy that if I go out of town with a crew, that allows me to put good officials here at Burroughs and locally for the different athletic competitions that go on. So I do a lot of travel. I go all the way to, we've gone to Lee Vining and Mammoth and Bishop, and we've gone all the way over to, we go to Kernville, Trona, we do ICS here, Emmanuel Christian School, and the other officials do Burroughs, but we can also go as far south as Desert and Mojave and Boron, Cal City, and during playoff time we can go all the way down into Los Angeles, because once you've seen a team during the second and higher rounds in playoffs, you can't do those. So those guys come up and do our playoff games, and we go down and get a chance to do some big ones down below. So it's a lot of traveling, a lot of wear and tear on vehicles, but like I said, all these guys are so dedicated to the youth of our community and trying to provide a quality effort all the time. A lot of people don't realize what goes into the study and trying to understand the rules, not just the rules, but the interpretation and applications on different issues. I'm really proud of all the guys we have that come out and dedicate so much time.
Talk about some of the maybe strange weather. Have you ever been up to Mammoth during maybe a snow or travel when it got really rough? I know Lee Vining, you've probably been up there to officiate also.
Well, I've heard stories from some of my mentors, the old guys who are now retired, that they've done games at Mammoth where they would back up on the sidelines and run into a snowbank that was 5 feet deep. And
wow.
So there was no room on the side to run down the sideline. You were running on the field, but the snowbank was right behind you. I went up and did a game about 3 years ago, and they had a brand new athletic director at Mammoth High School, and he didn't realize that it was his job to take the snow off the field. So when we walked down from the dressing room, all we saw was a carpet of white. And we asked him to get some snow shovels, and he went around the outside of the field. And so we had the lines on the side, but we didn't have any lines in the middle. We just had to play it by ear. And by the end of the night, the JV people had run through the snow so much that the snow was melting and running to the sides. By the end of the JV game, my feet were frozen, my shoes were frozen. We went and got bread bags and changed our socks, put the bread bags over a clean pair of socks, put another pair of socks on and our shoes on, and that's how we got through the varsity game, which was at night and even colder.
Oh boy!
And running on ice up and down the side. So there's been some really interesting events. We just came back from Boron last week, and it started getting cold. The weather had changed, officially had changed. Windy, cold, 40 degrees, 50 degrees, and so that's time to pull out the gloves and the earmuffs and things like that. So,
what about heat? How does that sometimes come into play?
It's really tough on some of us. Some of these guys in the summer times when you're out doing single man or double crew teams at sites where it's 115 degrees or 113 or whatever it is out there, and there's no wind, and you're just melting in your place, and you've got to run around the fields or baseball or softball diamonds and still get to the position to make a good call. And not only the players are sweating to death, but so are the officials. And on us, it's a little harder than the 18-year-olds. So.
All right, when we come back, we're going to ask Jim about some of the hardest things that he has to deal with, maybe parents, coaches, and other things when we get right back. Don't go away. This is Ridgecrest Talk. Tom Heck, Jim Ledbetter, back after this time out. And we're back, and we welcome you out there on this Tuesday night. Again, don't forget, tonight at 8 o'clock, election coverage live right here on KZGN. We're with Jim Ledbetter. Jim is the assigner for local officials. He also referees just about every sport that we have on the high school level and on the youth level. And he has bumped into and seen all kinds of things out there when it comes to parents and coaches and players, and I'm sure he could probably write a book, and a lot of us that have been around could probably put a few chapters in there. But Jim, talk about some of maybe the toughest things that you have to deal with when it comes to your profession.
Well, I suppose that's probably God love all the parents that come out. We love the parents to be out there, and the coaches putting the time in for the youth to actually play these sports. I suppose some of the hardest things is to have fans who think they know what the rules are. They watch a lot of sports on TV, college and professionals, and then they come to a high school or a youth activity, and they think the same rules apply to the high school or the youth activities, but they don't. The National Federation of High School Sports has a lot of issues that are completely different than what you would see on Saturday and Sunday. So a lot of times, and it's not intentional, but a lot of times a coach or a fan or somebody will be screaming about some play that you called, and you actually interpreted it and applied the rule correctly according to the rule book and the case book and the explanations that you get, and your experience, and you know how to call it, and the fans think it's wrong because it's not what they saw previously on a weekend on a TV show or something like that, or a major league competition, and that's probably the worst. Maybe a little bit above that would be a fan that actually comes out of the stands and confronts you on the way to the dressing room or the changing room, and they get a little bit over the top, possibly because they don't understand the real interpretation of the rule, or because the game was so well officiated. And I've had many of these with the people that dedicate their lives to sports. Many games come down to 1 or 2 points at the very end, and that means that it was well officiated, it was equitably called, and it was fairly called, and the players determined the game, or a play that was put in, or a attempted play that didn't work cost the team the game. And usually when I come out of a game like that where people are screaming and yelling at you, one side loves you, one side hates you, 50% of the people don't like you all the time when you leave. But the idea is, if it's a really close game and the kids have decided that we walk off proud of what we've done and what we've given them, but sometimes the fans will see it differently, that we cost them the game, and it's very rarely that that's truly the case.
Mm-hmm. You know, is there a point sometimes where you have to, and the crowd is a little bit out of hand? And I know on the venue that we have, there's a few places where the fans are almost on the floor. I know in basketball and even other sports, it can get a little bit, you know, rough, and they can be a little bit on the obnoxious side sometimes. But what can be done? Is there a point where there could be a technical assess to the stands? Have you ever seen something like that? Or usually there's some security there and some police presence. I bring all this up because, you know, we've been fortunate here, but there's been places that we read about during the past year where several officials have been killed, punched, or you know, beaten up. Unfortunately, in the professional soccer world, it seems like that happens, you know, fairly a good amount of time. But I know in Utah and in Georgia, there were incidents last year where a sports official was attacked by a player and people from the stands.
Well, you look at it all over the world, and one of my first things I do when I get my referee magazine, once you become a certified official, you automatically get a referee magazine. And I look at a couple of first pages has the incidents around the world and the country of this type of stuff happening. It's as society goes, so goes the self-control and discipline of the fans and parents and things like that. That's a sad state sometimes in some places. I don't think that I can recall anyone in our area in the time that I've been officiating here actually physically come out and accost an official. There have been some cases where the officials have stepped up to the plate and taken fans and told them to go. The officials have complete authority at a site to remove a fan or even a coach by disqualification if they get too over the top on their complaints or not listening to what the officials say. But all in all, I think around here we've got some pretty good people coaching and officiating, and they try to all work together, although you do have security at some sites. I know Kernville and some other places have sheriffs and police on site. The officials are more absolutely within their rights to ask them to escort somebody out, and they will. There have been incidents in other places outside of our area where an official completely clears an entire side of the gym, and they have the right and the power and the authority to do that if that's the case. We tend to try to deal with the administrative person on site when it comes to site like volleyball. If you target somebody with a negative comment, you can have the on-site administrator go to that area, fix it before you continue on with the game. And if you catch it early on, you catch it fast, you catch it at the beginning of the season, you catch it at the beginning of your game, and you set the stage for what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept, usually the fans and the parents and the players will fall into line. It's the people who tend to allow these things to go on and not want to do what's necessary that feeds the fire of discontent within the fans or the coaching staff or something like that. So I don't know in my entire career, because of the pre-games you have and because of the relationship you make with the coaches at the beginning, that I've ever thrown a coach out. I know people have, and they've had to, and they did the right thing. It may be that I just didn't have those coaches at that time, or it may be that they were having a bad day or whatever, but we do it probably very rarely around here, but we do it when it's necessary.
Now, in high school sports, if a player is ejected for maybe a couple of a flagrant foul or a couple of technical fouls for what they say or do, or a coach, they're suspended for the next game, correct?
When you disqualify a player or you disqualify a coach, the coach is gone for that match. They must leave the facility or the field. They can't just go up in the bleachers or sit on the bench. They have to leave the facility completely, and so does a player. And they are disqualified for the remainder of that game and the next contest, the first time they're disqualified. That does not mean that they can stay there for the next game. If it's a varsity game, if a JV coach gets disqualified, he can't be there that day at all, and then he's disqualified for the next match. That is another day and another time. They can't sit in the stands and watch the varsity game and talk up there. They have to leave. So it's the same thing with a player.
Okay, Jim, appreciate it. We'll be back for more with Jim Ledbetter, the officials. Tom Heck, KZGN. Be right back. And we're back. Tom Heck, Jim Ledbetter for our third part of our evening interview. Jim is, if you just tuned in, Jim, the assigner for the local high school officials, an official himself, also covers a lot of the youth sports in the town we have and works over at the high school in the registration office. And our last reminder, don't forget tonight, 8 o'clock, you can catch all the election coverage. This is Election Tuesday. You know, hard to believe, but it's here already. And tonight, right here, they'll have a lot of good information for you on KZGN. All right, Jim, let's ask you about some rule changes this year. I know it's basketball seems to be a sport where we get quite a few changes from time to time, but this year seems to be a few more than usual.
Yeah, the two sports that have been changed dramatically this year and that have taken the rules out and actually made them rules because the rules committee for the Federation was concerned that the people were thinking that these points limits were just suggestions when they really wanted them strictly adhered to. They took them out of there and put them in the rules. Now they're part of the rule book, so you have to do it. In football, absolutely the most serious year yet on concussion issues. You can see it nationally in the major leagues, but targeting of helmets, using helmets as battering rams or trying to target somebody above the shoulders with your arms or your hands or your helmet is strictly forbidden, and you have to enforce that. Okay. In basketball, it's the hand checking and intentional foul stuff, which is important to talk to everybody about, especially in this forum, so whoever watches it knows. In the past, people were putting their hands on too much and trying to direct the person with the ball.
Yep, gotta get that mic there. Oh boy, okay.
Now they're telling you that you can't put your hand on more than once. You can't put two hands on. You can't ride a person around on the sweep. And they're going to watch that a lot closer. The arm bars that usually come with female players trying to stop somebody from going past them are strictly forbidden now, and you have to call those things as a foul. The other big thing is at the end of a half or at the end of a game where you hear people saying foul them, foul them, foul them, so they can get the intentional, they can get a common foul, shoot two shots, maybe get the rebound and run down and make some points. That's taken out. They never wanted that to happen. I know there's going to be a lot of dissent about that, but the intentional foul where the coach screams foul them, or somebody screams from the stands foul them, they reach their arm around and grab them or grab their shirts, are intentional fouls now, which gives the offended team two shots and the ball at the point of interruption. So they take away the reason for intentionally fouling towards the end of the game or at the end of the half. Now there's no chance to get a rebound, so you don't need to do it. So they keep the people off each other. In basketball, they want the game to be freer. Less hands, less contact, let the people run in, make higher scores, but let the game be free and clear and play the game the way they would like it to be without a lot of bumper car contact stuff.
And that's going to be an adjustment for some teams to have to, and coaches to have to deal with. The thing about the intentional foul, and I believe in my heart as a coach for many years that, you know what, you have to teach kids how to give a foul, how to give an intentional foul. I mean, there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it, and unfortunately we see a lot of times where we get the way not to do it, and then that basically forces you to go ahead and maybe call an intentional foul, or even worse, when you really didn't want to in the first place. So that kind of puts us a little bit behind the 8 ball. We'll talk about football. What has been some changes this year?
Well, in football, they did a lot of stuff on the kickoffs. There was some issues with players on the kickoff team either creaming somebody coming across the 10-yard kicking zone, or someone on the receiving team waiting for a kicker who was unprepared and excessively blocking or knocking that person down. They had some issues there. So on the kickoff, you have to be within 5 yards. You can't be behind. You can't get a running start. The only person who can do that is the kicker. Like I say, in football, the sportsmanship stuff is extremely important, and they want you to pay special attention to a defenseless player who's away from the point of attack, away from the mass of players who are playing the game correctly, and then somebody gets blindsided away from the play or thrown to the ground, and those type of things are no longer acceptable and are unsportsmanlike fouls. They've always been kind of tough to call because by the time you see them away from the point of attack, you have two guys pushing each other. Which guy did it first? Which guy did it in retaliation? But now they don't want you to let any of that stuff go. There's no reason for anyone to get hurt 20 yards away from a play by getting thrown to the ground or excessively blocked when they're not prepared to receive that type of a hit or a contact. So those are the big major deals above the shoulders, away from the play, and the running start on the kickoff stuff. The rest of the stuff is pretty normal and called normally.
Now, I also you do volleyball and you also do baseball and softball. Anything there has changed over the years?
When I first did volleyball, it was regular scoring, and you'd spend 5 hours doing a match, and with the rally scoring that has come in since then is a pretty good idea, because you can pretty much figure that whether you play a playoff game or not, or a tiebreaker or not, you're going to be an hour and a half or so for a volleyball match. Other than that, they want us to, at the lower levels, be a little more flexible on the hand control, because at that level they're learning and trying to you call it really bad stuff, but you try to let them play. People don't come to watch us blow our whistles and call control fouls at the JV level. They come to watch the kids play, and they really get excited when the rallies get going at that level. When you get up to the varsity level, you have to be a little more strict. You have to be a little more aware of what they're doing with the ball, because they do have the ability to play it better and try to get some things across the net that they probably shouldn't. But all in all, most of the kids and the coaches are teaching them to play well in that sport. Baseball, softball, football, basketball, it's all the number one concern nowadays is safety. Kids not getting injured before they get into college, and kids not getting injured and not being recognized, which is why we have the coaches evaluate them. If the official suspects concussion in any of those sports, they give them to the coach to evaluate if they really believe they've been concussed and they're gone for the day. And that's the way it should be. At least our goal is to get kids to play contests and not go home injured.
Okay, Jim, thanks for coming by tonight. We really learned a lot. I thought that was very interesting, a lot of the points you made, and we'll definitely in the future talk to you again.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim Ledbetter. Next week, Kim Young from Saracoso Volleyball. Again, don't forget the election coverage tonight right here at 8 o'clock. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Tom Heck, KZGN Sports.